Thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. You know, TV has made amazing strides when you think of where it was just a few years ago with Nielsen to where it is today. Addressable TV continues to pace well beyond those capabilities, and we're leaping into further capabilities with data and technology that are taking form quickly. Tracey Scheppach is the CEO and co-founder of Mattermore Media and a true subject matter expert in the TV space. And on this episode, we'll discuss strategies for how TV is continuing to evolve from 1.0 to where we are today and to where we might soon be in the future. So let's tune in to Tracey TV and Shark TV on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Tracey, thank you so much for being here on A Shark's Perspective today. Really excited to have you here to talk about TV in particular, but tell us, if you would, a little bit about your career and what made you have such a passion for TV.
Oh, Kenneth. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. What a big question to think about. I started my career in accounting, actually as a CPA. So I'm very numbers oriented and want to prove value. And kind of rose through finance, went back and got my MBA at Northwestern, and really just fell in love with marketing. Was a brand manager, and did commercials, did direct mail, did NCAP. It was a CPG client that I was the brand manager for, and did it all. Did trade and saw the whole marketing budget. Was responsible for it, and was recruited by a high tech television company. It was interesting. I sponsored a figure skating championship when I was the brand manager, and I went home, and when it aired, I turned on all of my TVs, and I went back the next day to work and told my boss I did my job for the ratings. And he laughed. He said, "That's not how it works." And he sat me down and explained to me how the ratings worked. And I said, "That, how can that be accountable? I can't believe I've been asking for millions of dollars to put on TV when that's the measurement." So, I learned that there was a big opportunity to be um, a big opportunity around data-driven television. And it made no sense to me that the set-top box or the TV was not collecting what I was watching. And that was in the 1990s. So I happened to be on a boondoggle and ran into a CEO of a high-tech television company called Wink. And she said, we do this interactive TV thing, but she had mentioned that they actually collected every second of viewership on the TVs that they had the software deployed on. And I said, game changer. And she offered me a job, and through a lot of painful startup drama, being acquired by Open TV, we were able to not only collect second by second and do interactive television on 7 million boxes, we also pioneered the very first addressable television um, deployment in Aurora, Colorado in 2003. So I was always like really into how television was going to change, and always really loved television as a medium. So as a brand manager, I spent a lot of money on paper things like coupons or a direct mail piece. And I never felt the connection of being able to build a brand like Sight, Sound, and Motion could do. So I've always been a huge believer in what television can do for an advertiser and what advertising can do for television. So I've just always been very passionate about that. I know the technology is out there. My father was one of the founders of Experience, so I happen to know, what that direct mail business was like. And I just did not understand why the direct mail approach could not be applied to sight, sound, and motion. So I've spent 15 years trying to make that happen.
When you were talking about it from a brand manager standpoint and feeling that connection, I'm 100% there with you. But did you also correlate it to sales? Because a lot of people will still argue that, you know, that don't understand the TV space that we've been in, that, direct mail's a better driver, or email or digital. I mean, did you see something then that made you start thinking this is a great play for performance and lead gen and sales?
Well, we did, our KPI was sales on things like coupons. and direct mail. And we always had a way to try and prove that it was working, whether you had a BRC that somebody had to fill out, and become a subscriber to your news letter, or whether you had Catalina and it was being tied back to did they redeem the coupon. We were always looking for that, and it was completely missing in television. But knowing, having, a father as a mentor, who really understood technology 20 years before its time, I completely saw that it was capable and that it should happen. It makes business sense for the consumer to see less irrelevant advertising. We're just wasting people's time. We're wasting marketers' money. And I think the programmers should be able to monetize their content better with advertisers with better data and better addressability. So it felt like there's no reason this shouldn't happen. And so I was excited to try and be a pioneer in the space. I just never really anticipated how long it was going to take.
Sure. Well, so I've heard you say on previous interviews before, since you brought up data, that we're on the tipping point with data, and walk us through what you mean by that. I know I'm particularly interested in how you bring in that digital data through something different than just a household file.
Ooh, so digital data, is difficult. So I think of, television's progression. If you think of TV 1.0 as the Nielsen full waste model that the majority of television is really still in, 2.0 was what is becoming this index-based approach that the networks can get their hands on some data and try and help an advertiser understand that their true target has a higher concentration on this show versus that show, or this network versus that network, and could sell that value to an advertiser who would be willing to pay a premium to reach a higher concentration of their audience. So that was 2.0. 3.0 is where you use the same type of data and you can eliminate all of the waste. So, I purposely over the last 15 years have separated 2 and 3.0 because I thought 2.0 would happen faster. And it would take longer for 3.0 to actually deploy the technology. Just understanding, measurement is actually a fairly thin client on a set-top box or a smart TV. But to be able to do ad serving is a much heavier lift on the technology side, especially in a cable plant. Hard, not easy. So, you could do it easy on, over the top or VOD, but the rest of linear needs to have it be retrofitted, with new technology, which is much harder. So we always separated those ideas when we would talk to clients. um, Turns out that addressable kind of peaked out, a little quicker, so 3.0 started to happen before 2.0. But when I talk about we're starting to reach a tipping point, you're seeing really good traction with the networks to talk about index based. So lots of chatter in the upfront about that. It makes sense for them and it makes sense for the clients to be doing deals that are index based. And then you're starting to see, a significant amount of volume going on addressable TV. So I think, we're at the tipping point on both of those. You asked specifically about what I would call 4.0 TV, and that is, things that are starting to open up that are IP based as opposed to household address based. So 2.0 and 3.0 are generally household address based, indexed and addressability. 4.0, you're starting to see things like smart TV addressability. You're starting to see things like ATSC 3.0 addressability and data collection for both of those. And they are more of a challenge because they're IP based. So you have to make a map back from IP based to household based and vice versa. Some advertisers will do better in targeting and measurement if it's an IP based system. The majority of the advertisers that I see and work with actually do better in a household addressed, or households measured system because they are, for instance, my favorite category is catalogers. So catalogers have so much, household address data. It's a little harder, and the 4.0 ecosystem is a little further out. So there's a lot of work being done. Like, how do I map an IP address to a mobile device to a household address with good accuracy and fidelity?
So let's talk strategy then today. How should advertisers approach TV today differently than, say, they did 5 years ago? I mean, we're making leaps and bounds, especially when you talk about advancing from 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0 and pretty healthy paces. But how should advertisers approach TV today differently?
Well, they should absolutely demand accountability on their TV investments
Amen.
because it is possible, and so they should not take no for an answer. Yeah, so demanding accountability is a must for any advertiser that is currently on television. And I would not take no for an answer, not from a network, not from your agency. The answer is you need to know that your media investment is working and how is it working and how can it work better. What I'm really interested in is to try and bring new advertisers to TV. So those existing advertisers should be demanding accountability. They should be looking at how to target. They should be looking at their own CRM file. They should be understanding their consumer at a greater extent. They should be pushing their creative shops to start building content that speaks to the true target, not the watered down age and gender surrogates that were used. But what I really think is super exciting is to go after advertisers that have never been on television before. So I love to talk to catalogers and big catalogers that might have a lot of money in marketing. And they just don't think TV was ever an option, whether it was too expensive or it wasn't, targetable or measurable. It's so fun to walk in there and say, you can now be on, you know, the good doctor with amazing measurement and things that you're more used to. So depending on the client is how my answer would vary. I really like to get clients that have never been on TV excited.
So when you're approaching them, and I know that sometimes other agencies that maybe an AOR that represents them, is not necessarily a roadblock, but they're a partner that you have to engage with. Are you seeing more agencies coming up to speed faster and addressable?
Ooh,
Answer that
without being
politically
too,
correct.
yeah, I was like, ooh, without being I don't know, too controversial. I think, there were two leaders, I think, from the big holding companies, Publicis and WPP. And, both of those shops have dispersed their leadership. And I don't think they've backfilled in the way that there was before. And it's hard. And not to have a centralized resource to do this asks way too much of individual account teams. It's just too hard. It requires too much expertise. It is very manual. You've got to know a lot of players. You got to know a lot about data. And the agency models from the big holding companies are simply, breaking on. They're on shaky ground. There's too many silos. They're not allowed to put enough staff. That's the fault of the, advertisers putting too much pressure on the head count. I don't think they're cutting headcount where they need to and putting it where it should be. I think the technology is starting to get ahead of them. And I think the media companies are ready to go. And now we got a problem that the holding companies aren't ready.
So then let's, as we see the advertisers and agencies and TVs each having a different space, we've talked a little bit about the advertisers that you like to work with and a little bit about the ecosystem of the agencies. Let's talk about the little bit about the TVs. Who are you seeing? And you don't have to necessarily name the exact TVs, but what are you seeing the smart, MVPDs doing in the space that some of the others need to catch up with? I mean, each, each TV has its own regional footprint for the most part. I mean, you've got DirecTV, which is national, but you've got an Altice, which is primarily in the Northeast, or Charter and Cox that are in different locations. What are you seeing that, from a technology standpoint or capability standpoint, smart things that the MVPDs are doing that you'd like to see in all of them?
Well, let's name names. I mean, this is not fun to not name names.
Sure.
Well, I mean, clearly DirecTV and AT&T is a leader. I
Sure.
mean, clearly. And I think, they stand poised. I was hopeful that Comcast and NBCU would fill this position, 5 or 6 years ago when they came together. But really understanding the complexities of cable architecture has really held them back. They're starting to catch up again, but DirecTV is just a different animal. Satellite is completely different than cable from a technology standpoint, which made it so that they could deploy quite easily. So I think when they acquire and close on Turner, that's going to give them a huge, huge asset. And they are poised to take advantage of it. I think they provide the most thoughtful product in the marketplace, quickly followed by Dish. Um, so those two, I think, are my one-two go-tos when I'm starting to activate for a client. If I get a new client and I'm building a business on them being happy, you want to start where there's less risk, and that's where I start. Unless the client happens to be regional. And then it just really depends on the regional footprint. I think what Oath is doing is probably really fantastic. Their technology is superior to cable again. I think Altice has done absolutely everything they possibly could with their technology. So I give them mad props to be an early adopter of all this, and teaching people like Kristen Dolan, who was running marketing for them, like how to create a company that adds value beyond Altice. And, Charter's slow to come. I think some of the over the top players are great. I'm really, interested in their growth, people like a Hulu or a CBS All Access or, those players. It's very interesting because they have the ability to dynamically insert. VOD's been behind. I'm always, mad that VOD didn't develop faster. But people like Canoe are doing a great job of kind of pulling that together. We'll see how NCC. There's been some recent announcement about NCC that might consolidate, the advanced TV marketplace a little bit better. So I'm hopeful on that, and I'm really excited by some of the stuff that ATSC 3.0 can offer. That still might be 3 years out, but to be able to have over-the-air broadcast inventory to be fully measurable and accountable is very, very exciting. And maybe to be in a cheaper, more efficient distribution model too. So I think there's a lot of cool things that are happening. There's some clear leaders and some really cool stuff that's happening. Addressability and data-driven television is not a if, it's a when. When will this be, fully scaled? Not if it's going to happen.
So when do you think we'll get to the point that we'll be able to take campaigns across all channels? I mean, obviously TV, with the amount of money that people put into it, generally, wags the dog. But you start putting in campaigns with a Facebook or some other medium. When do you think we're going to be able to really pull together all the different channels so that we can show, even if it converts on social or any other or on some programmatic display, if I know that TV has made that connection standpoint, like you talked about earlier, that human connection, just being able to pull all those campaigns together from an omni-channel standpoint would be worth a lot, except that you can't get the data to be shared by all the different publishers because they're all worried about competing for each other against ad spend. However, from an advertiser standpoint, obviously we need to see those, where that symbiosis turns into a conversion. When do you think that's going to happen?
Um, when and who? So my first went to who. It's an interesting time. I think I would start with privacy. I usually don't start there because the TV space is regulated. I don't worry about it as much. But I did watch Mark Zuckerberg's testimony and was like, oh my God, like this is just the excuse to have big walled gardens.
Mm-hmm.
Like somehow you don't have any data seepage to Cambridge Analytica. Like I will just be a walled garden, and that's to his advantage, and that's to the disadvantage of consumers and to advertisers. Like we want to have perfect harmony of reach and frequency across all media. Like, I don't want to see the ads too many times as a consumer. As an advertiser, I don't want to pay for it too many times. So to me, that those players are going to try and remain a walled garden, and they will do anything that they can to do that. It's probably in their business interests. So the question is, what technology could come, who owns some technology that could come around that could actually triangulate TV exposure, mobile exposure, and online exposure, and then let's see if we get another one like ATSC over the air exposure, right? The new internet, if you will.
Absolutely.
So we've got three kind of now. We might have a fourth coming, and how can you triangulate those exposures? There are probably people like the first one that comes to my mind is Samsung that could do that. They have a handheld device. They have um, a television. The television can connect traditional TV and this new ATSC 3.0. So a player like that could create a different kind of walled garden. So it is a very, very hard question. And I would start with who. And once you could kind of start to see who could emerge like that, you can then start to understand how fast they could pull that off.
So, how should we measure ROI for addressable campaigns that are omni-channel, considering that we're likely running, an audience file against different channels, TV, email, social, everywhere else? What are your recommendations to people? And then, are there recommendations you have for a omni-channel campaign that can pair it with TV? Is it TV and something on mobile or social or whatever? What's sort of your recommendation on best practices for that?
Okay, so for most clients, my recommendation would be patient.
Mm-hmm.
It's not time yet.
Yeah.
Um, but there's probably some pieces you could start to think about. So, for catalogs, again, one of my favorite categories, there is a catalog drop, that it gets mailed on a date. And there is a television campaign, and understanding the relationship between dropping a catalog and showing ads. Like, do I show the ads first? Does that make the catalog work harder? Do I drop the catalog first and then show some ads? Does that make them open the catalog? Like, understanding that completely manual. Like, this is not like automated in any way. So you need experts, not to toot my own horn, like Mattermore, to get in there to try and help understand the correlation of two incredibly large investments that you can start to do some manual lifting on. I don't see anybody connecting the ecosystem together where I've logged onto a dashboard, I can buy inventory, I can understand how it works and optimize it across multiple channels. And I think that's probably where you need to be patient. I think people like an AT&T and Brian Lesser are going to try and get it there, but as an advertiser, I think the opportunity does not exist. You still need to be maximizing. I think of it from the couch out. So think about TV first. A lot of digital players, think about it digital first. A lot of mobile players think about mobile first. So maybe I live in my own world, but thinking about it from your TV investment, what I try and help clients do is understand how hard the TV investment can work, and whether that is I can pixel the website so I can understand that you saw the TV ad and you visited the site, whether I can use like a ninth decimal and geolocation basis. So I know someone in the household saw the ad. I know someone in the household went to the store, and then using the client's, purchase files to understand, did that household that saw the ad purchase the product? So we're not yet kind of to the place where we can connect banner impressions digitally, but we are at the place where we can connect TV impressions to online visits and TV impressions to mobile location. So it's not banners that are I like the mobile device and the mobile data, the mobile opportunity to be data focused. Like, I can't remember the last mobile ad I saw that had any impact on me except me being annoyed.
Exactly.
So I like to think about a couch out. I mean, I know that could be, maybe a selfish way to look at it because of my love for TV and sight, sound, and motion. But to me, that's the hardest working, creative asset I have as a brand manager.
So you've talked about some of the different stages and phases of TV, that as you sort of define them, the 1.0s to 4.0s, and let's pull out Tracy's crystal ball. I can tell you at least mine is that magic 8 ball that always says "ask again later." But channel your inner Nostradamus and tell us what you think are the emerging platforms of the future, and what do you see happening within the industry?
Okay, I have my eyes closed. I'm thinking hard. I wish it was called something else, but I am very excited by um, over the top. So addressable, household addressable, I would say all day long is probably. It just needs to. It needs to evolve. It needs to be more scaled. Um, so without saying to me, the world is going that way. So once I kind of like say, okay, that's going to happen. Now what? I love some of these IP, ideas like over the top and some of the ATSC 3.0. I want it to be called something else because I think it's almost like the next internet. It's a different way to distribute bits. That ATSC 3.0 is very exciting, but it sounds like engineering talk at the moment. So
Tracy
when I like,
TV.
yeah, let's call it Tracy TV, right? It's so exciting to me. If Netflix could distribute its content at 1/10 the cost,
Oh my gosh.
where do you think they would distribute it? Over the internet or over the air? So to me, it opens up like, we're not at the end of the internet yet. Like it's all about speed and accuracy to me. And so when I start to think about my crystal ball, it's about being having bits distributed quicker, cheaper to the right people faster, right? That's to me, if I was gaming the stock market, I would be looking for people that do that. And then, of course, there's always the wild card of like an Amazon. Like when you spend a bit of time just thinking about what Amazon could do to TV, it's quite scary.
Tracy, I know there's something other than TV that you are extremely passionate about, and I know that's about your son and his battle over the years. He's healthy now, but he's had cancer. But talk about your fight outside of TV about helping kill cancer.
Well, thank you for asking this question. I have unfortunately heard those four words that no parent should hear. Your child has cancer, and I can tell you it is life changing. And I'm a person who sees an opportunity to make things better and tries to go after it. And the way I started to understand, I mean, when the oncologist came into the room to tell me, I didn't know what an oncologist was. And then he said blood cancer, and I'm like, you can get cancer in your blood. But let me tell you, I got up to speed really quick, and then I saw huge holes in what needed to happen to cure this disease once and for all, starting with children, but I think larger than children with leukemia. And to me, it was like eye opening that there was so much progress that was made through, since the 1950s to today that have saved millions of, not probably millions, but hundreds of thousands of children's lives. Was the idea that the data on the clinical treatment plan was centralized. So every child since like the 50s, there is a document that describes what dosage of what chemotherapies they got through their treatment plan. My son had 14 different type of chemo treatments and 1,400 chemo admissions. And so there's a file with his, number tied to him. This is what he got. What was missing was the genetic information that basically said, well, why does he have cancer genetically? So I pushed very hard to have our doctor genetically sequence my son. She actually said no, and I took it to a leading hospital. It happened to be CHOP in Philadelphia, and asked them to sequence it. And they gave me back a piece of paper and said, there's two deletions. This is the reason he has it. There's nothing to know about that except that's the reason. And I was like, well, I feel satisfied that I know that could happen. And I've, for the last 6 years, asked 420 people to join me to do the Chicago Triathlon and swim, bike, and run and raise money to try and solve what looks like to me is a big data problem. So I'm really excited. Last night we had our annual fundraiser, and we've now raised over $1 million. And it is my hope to essentially put two gigantic data sets together and sequence every child diagnosed with blood cancer, and then understand clinically what they received and what their outcomes were. To me, again, this is a lot of like MarTech. This is just like big data problems. And I always would just sit there in the hospital with my son and be so pissed off at the amount of money that was going into MarTech and how little the amount of money was going into pediatric cancer research. So I've just been on a mission to try and, make a change to that. So if anybody who's listening wants to join the team or donate, it's teambrightside.com.
So, Tracey, thank you again for being on A Shark's Perspective today. Tell people where they find out more about you and your company.
So you can find out about our company at mattermoremedia.com, and you can find out more about my charity at teambrightside.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you.
So there was my conversation with Tracey Scheppach, the CEO and co-founder of Mattermore Media. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from that conversation. First, we're on the tipping point with TV because of data. And when you think of where we've been with TV 1.0 to where we're going with 4.0 with IP addresses, and also smart TV addressability, and ATSC 3.0 addressability, and data collection for both of those, I'm looking forward to that future when we might see good accuracy and fidelity as well. Second, advertisers and all marketers should demand accountability on their TV investment because it is possible. They should not take no for an answer, not from a network, agency, publisher, or anyone else. Third, addressability in data-driven television is not an if, but it is a when. When will this fully be scaled is the question. And a rare fourth, if you don't give to Team Brightside, her charity to help raise money to cure childhood cancer, then consider giving to some charity that does help fight that cause. Because like she said, no parent should ever hear the words, your child has cancer. Got a question? Please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this show regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. So go do something that matters more to you and go have a remarkable day. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.